reaching out from Galway, Ireland, out here spending time with family, getting to see my sister, my dad. Last time I've been here 3 years ago. I want to share a little bit of my journey with you. Here's my dear old dad. I haven't seen him in 3 years. Last time I was out here, it's right before the plandemic, scandemic, goddamn-demic. Came here with my 2 older sons. My oldest son, Jacob, was supposed to play in the high school marching band for St. Patrick's Day in 2020. And the very last minute, day or two before, they were going to take off and go tour Ireland, play in Dublin and Limerick, and Galway. The world shut down. And, well, hell, we're Irish, so I took them anyway. I brought the 2 older boys, and we did a trek around the island. We'll get into that a little bit as we proceed here. Just wanted to share this. When you're in Ireland, it's hard not to come from the heart. And I'm just so happy to be here and spending time with my dad. He's been out here with my sister ever since Mom passed away, going on 10 years. And yeah, it's just so good to see him. Back in 2020, everything being shut down, wasn't much to do or many places to go to, except that there was, if you just went and did it. So my boys and I hopped over the sign that said you can't go any further, and we ended up hiking the cliffs of Moher by ourselves. Might have passed 1 or 2 wayward strangers, big smiles and no masks, and it was a glorious day just like this. And it's something that I'll cherish for the rest of my life. And it was just one of those times where I connected deeply with this land. So on Easter Sunday, I needed to kind of get out and about. I was missing my own family, and decided I wanted to go back to the Stone Tower of Kilmacduagh, and I hope I got that right. There's an abbey there. On the way, I had to pass through Gort, and I was drawn to this church. You know, all this talk about electric architecture was really resonating with me, and I found myself drawn to it. I wasn't planning on coming here, and I thought about that, what that means to be drawn to a place, and that it would have some kind of pull, you know, some kind of magnetic vortex or some gravity of its own that draws you towards it. And so I followed that intuition and ended up having quite the experience. And mind you, this was Easter Sunday. I hadn't planned to go to church. I haven't been to church in years. I grew up going to Catholic church, and you know, my dad, as you might imagine, is God-fearing Catholic, and keeps the Lord close to his heart, as did my mother. And it's not a path that I followed as an adult, but it's certainly a part of my upbringing. I went to church every Sunday. So here I found myself on Easter Sunday in Gort, standing outside this edifice and wondering and just feeling, not trying to judge one way or another. And as I approached it, I noticed this metal strap, this copper cable bolted to the side of the church, coming from the fractal cross at the top, anchored deep into the ground. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing, because I had talked about these kind of things so much and seen other folks pointing this sort of thing out on castles and interrupting the electromagnetic flow of these old world buildings. And here it is, and I just scratched my head and I spent time with it. I thought, what is this? What is it doing? Is this a lightning rod? And if it's just a strap for a lightning rod, well, what would happen if it wasn't there? What would lightning do to a building like this? Would it hurt it? Would it hurt the occupants? I didn't know. As much as I thought about these kind of things, I didn't have any kind of easy answer. I thought, well, I wonder if this is a retrofit. I wonder if this came later, like long after this building was built, when the electrical components were added. I wonder if that is an artifact of modernity, in fact, because etheric electricity is more of a risk to the components of, the technical wizardry of the electric age. So I decided to walk into the church, as you see, and this is what I came upon. And mind you, this was the side entrance. This wasn't the main lobby. So I thought that was interesting. But here it was, the holy water. Of course, I helped myself and I said a blessing. Now, as I said, I've looked into this sort of thing before, and I had just come across these images on another podcast, and I took some screenshots of them just a few days ago. And isn't that what we were just seeing on the church in Gort? This add-on. Well, some call it Antiquitech, but I don't know. This is an add-on. This is not part of the architecture, and if it was, why couldn't they just have already included it? I feel like, when I look at this, I feel like it is a bypass of some sort. It's certainly bypassing the building visually, and then there's these really cool details on how to actually bolt it all together. And when you look at what they do with it, this is the earth, okay? And this is the earth, and what you have in here looks like some kind of an artesian well. And then there's sort of this cable would have been branched off. And it's like kind of grounded, but it's in water. That's not in the earth. And I'm sorry I don't speak French. I'm just going by what I'm looking at. Now there's more. Here it is again, a little more clearly. Installation d'un paratonnerre de Franklin. Benjamin Franklin, no doubt. Okay, a paratonnerre is, I looked it up, a lightning rod. That's what they say it is. Okay, so all these buildings were around for a long time until old Ben himself invented a lightning rod. The same time that the technical wizards were refining their work with electricity and electromagnetism, playing with big energies. Again, more details, make of it what you will. Looks like a bit of a bypass, energetic bypass. And then this. So here we have another diagram of what we see, right? What we just looked at. These same kind of copper cables, these straps, okay? From the either antenna or crosses or Antiquitech, pulling that down and bringing that energy down into the earth. In this case, it is the earth. Now we look at here, and this looks like it'd be some kind of a well. Maybe that's showing the earth, but that could be a well as well. Okay. I wonder if those do the same thing, or if those do different things. If you're grounding in water versus earth, maybe there's some folks out there that know more than I do that can offer some thoughts on that. Here again, okay? Now what is this? Do you really need this if your purpose is just a lightning rod to protect the building? Is this what you need? Or are we starting to get into some kind of circuitry here? Because that's what this looks like. And then all sorts of ways of strapping it to the building and making it structural and everything, because they didn't just go on Amazon and, click a button for a Yagi antenna that you bolt to the side of your house. Big structures, big energy. Well, I did have to walk into the main lobby. As I said, I haven't been to church in quite a few years, so it honestly didn't come easy. I was conflicted, but I looked, and I saw that the door was open, and so I poked my head in, and this is what I came across. And after the intensity of being outside and looking up, to come in and be presented with the Virgin Mary and the feeling of walking into a sort of a cave, very womb-like, it was very warm, a couple of candles lit, and I found myself in a meditation over the sacred feminine. And then I turned around, and on the other side of the lobby was this statue reminding us all, he is risen. And I thought about what that means to me. I'm not somebody that calls himself a Christian, I don't claim Christianity, although I was raised with it, and then I spent as much time in my life, as many years, claiming atheism. And now, pretty sure atheism can't explain what's going on here. And all of this looking into the ether and plasma physics has made it very clear to me, and I've said this before, but I'll say it here, it's made it very clear to me that science and spirituality are not enemies. They're two sides of a coin. The idea that you can't have one without the other, or that if you have one, you have to let go of the other, that's a false dichotomy. I think that's the great deception. And when we're talking about, be it spirituality, religion, or electromagnetic, etheric architecture, what we're getting into are transcendent principles. And, materialism that comes with the modern age, scientism, doesn't allow for it, right? It doesn't allow for those transcendent principles. And it sets up it cloisters, I want to get this right, it cloisters scientific consensus as really the new gospel with its own high priests, doesn't it? And isn't scientism, hasn't it shown itself to be so much dogma after all? Well, these thoughts sat with me, and I opened my heart to the sacrifice of a loving man who, at least representationally, symbolically, metaphorically, is the embodiment of a pure, enlightened, transcendent spirit in physical form. So, I was going to go ahead and help myself to the church, which was completely empty. And I was going to cross that threshold into the pews. The last time I'd been in a space like this, I really believe it was in Portugal, but it was filled with congregants during Mass, and so, I didn't stay long. But here I found myself alone, completely alone, on Easter Sunday at church in Ireland. But I had to get past the threshold. I had to maintain 2-meter distance at all times, right? Because don't you know, the sort of average human energy field is all of 2 meters, and we don't want to be crossing with one another, do we? Just had a thought here where if you had two people standing 1 meter apart with a 2-meter energy field, well, guess what? Your energy fields would create a vesica Pisces, in that shared space of your own Venn diagram. Isn't that interesting to think about? Maybe try standing 1 meter away from somebody for a while, and both of you in meditation, and see what that feels like. So I decided I wasn't going to pay much attention to this line any more than I did the sign 3 years ago at the Cliffs of Moher. So I got brave and I went to church, and I marveled at this building. Compared to many cathedrals, this is a humble space, but compared to being out in the rain, it felt quite glorious and comforting, and it really blew my mind, because I had been studying these types of structures. I'm working on an octagon house right now, and I was looking for a model for the roof system. And while squares lend themselves neatly to octagons, and here you have this, this is called the king post, okay? Right here, in your timber trusses will tie into it, and this becomes all of a piece and self-supporting. And so if you imagine that roof up above, that tall spire would be ascending from here. It's all about ascension, isn't it? And here, these clear story windows. I marveled at this and thought about what it takes to build it, and you could see it. Look at how these steel straps are holding together the braces, the columns, the rafter beams, right? The bottom cord. This makes a truss, doesn't it? This makes a truss, right? Landing on the column, being braced laterally, okay, by these corner braces, but they're just solid. Think about the trees these came out of. I mean, this is just mighty, strapped with steel cables. I mean, this is cool. This is cool building right here, right? And then all that power, all that strength, all that integrity, all that energy that's focused, right? Focalized on the altar. And you think about what does altar mean? Like some word magic. To alter, to transform. And another term for altar is transmutation. And so you think about, the work of alchemists. And you think about these transcendent principles, these transcendent beliefs, and it's not all love and light, right? Because it seems by having to pass over a threshold, warning me to stay apart from my fellow man, from my fellow human. Like in the Bible, it says, where two or more come together in my name, there I will be. But if we can't come together, we've short-circuited this whole endeavor, haven't we? And I'm saying this with as much a rational mind as with a inner voice. So we need to come together. We need to congregate. And that's what this was for. Okay? This was for that. And so we run into in this word magic of alter and transmute. The Bible also says you can't worship two masters. And maybe on some level, I feel certainly if you asked a Catholic priest what they thought of the alchemists, and when they'd say that they've strayed from the gospel, that it's somehow taking the power out of the hands of the Lord, that perhaps turning one element into another, lead into gold as it were, is somehow playing God. I don't know that that's the case. I believe that Jesus himself said that if you have faith, you will do great things like me, and even more miraculous. So what was he referring to? What was he saying? Maybe Jesus was an alchemist himself. Maybe there's something in that the church wants to keep suppressed, I'll just say. But I'm not afraid of it. And again, I don't think, just like science and spirituality are not enemies, I think perhaps any conflict between alter and transmute in the physical sense, in this 3D realm, that would be a false dichotomy as well. So these are just some things that I was thinking as I was going through, and I did approach the altar, and I knelt. I still couldn't believe I was by myself, and yet I knew in my heart that I very much was not alone. And so I lit a candle, and I said a prayer for my father. I said a prayer that God be with him, and I believe God is with him. It's hard to watch your parents grow old, especially when their bodies begin to fail them. And at the same time, my dad's love shines through him more than I've ever seen before. And I'll always remember these times. I'll always cherish this time. And I'm very grateful. I didn't plan on sharing so much, but here we are. Then I made my way around the transept and the nave, and the choir. And here, I believe this was in the transept, I came upon this representation of Easter. And, I know that Catholic Church gets a bad rap. I've participated in the pile-on myself. Some of it I believe is warranted. But then there's, life just being a paradox. Everywhere you look, it's a paradox. And like, is it Walt Whitman said, do I contradict myself? Very well then, I am full of contradictions. And here we are, and I thought, all I see and feel here is peace. I felt very much at peace, and I felt love. So am I a Christian? I don't know what that makes me. I think I'm human, but I also know a thing when I see it, feel it, and I know what I felt as I stood here on Easter Sunday. And as I made my way down the pews, I came across this shrine to the Mother Mary, and again, this statue just gave me a lot of comfort. And who couldn't feel comforted by this statue? The rosary beads are an add-on, as you can see. But I looked, and she's gesturing to these two old wooden desks with some writing, and so I had to look at what was being said here. And well, we very much appreciate all those who donate flowers to the church. However, to prevent cross-contamination at this given time, we would ask you to refrain from doing so until COVID-19 restrictions have been lifted. As per government directives, stay home and stay safe. Wait a minute, this is April of 2023. I know I'm in Ireland, but pretty sure things got lifted. Either the church leaders didn't see fit to remove these directives, or they're still in place. I mean, maybe that's why nobody was in church. I guess I figured that things had resumed, that Mass was in session, but there was no people there. As per government directives. But I'm in a house of worship. When has the Catholic Church ever bowed down to a government? And how powerful would that government have to be? Certainly bigger than the Irish government, with their Leo Varadkar Taoiseach Prime Minister and his Trudeau-esque petite dictator tendencies during COVID. What is this doing here? And isn't this just another reminder of the means and mechanisms that they employ to keep people suppressed? And I just thought, this is cruel. And I thought, what am I seeing here? Our Mother Mary is standing on a snake. And talk about paradox. This snake lapping out the forked tongue at this government directive. Thank you for your flowers, but we prefer not to cross-contaminate, saith the serpent. This could not be any clearer. Refuge of sinners, pray for us. Folks, I'm not making this up. I couldn't do it if I wanted to. These messages were just leaping out of the woodwork and the stonework at me. And then I thought, well, I've done ayahuasca dozens of times. And the snake to the Shipibo tradition is a powerful medicine animal. It's not the evil serpent that it is in Christianity and Catholicism. No, it's a representative of the earth and the life-giving force of the Gaia principle of wisdom. And thought, well, which is true? Maybe it's just that context matters. Maybe context really matters, because this is an evil-looking snake and she's stomping on it. But here I am in Ireland, and we just passed St. Patrick's Day, where the snakes were driven out of Ireland by the Catholic Church, weren't they? And the snakes in that context represented paganism, which would have been closer to the Shipibo tradition. So maybe it's true that just in everything there's paradox. Just as people say, well, science saves lives. Science multiplies the bounty of harvest, and on about the benefits of science. Sure, But can you think of another age that has caused more death and destruction than the modern one? As I was exiting the church finally, I passed by what I knew in the past would have contained holy water. The same holy water that I encountered coming in, which was on this day in the side lobby, and the main lobby was empty, and some Easter flowers were here, which was nice. But here again, they turned the holy water into the hand sanitizing station. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding? With the cross? Wait a minute. However, to prevent cross contamination, you think that's by accident? More prevention of cross contamination. Is this cross? Which cross is more powerful, more meaningful? You think they put this on here by accident? No. This is the hand sanitizer station. This is where the holy water goes. I'm sorry, but somebody's got to check what the government's up to. And then I noticed this. Oh boy, does the pagan really come through in the Catholic Church. And that's why if there was any religion that I was ever going to go back to, it would have to be Catholicism. Because it's not antithetical to paganism. It's infused with it. That somebody saw to put this Celtic folk cross, let's call it a folk cross, above. And it's tied in here. Isn't this nice? I mean, maybe this is Christian. I'd say it's a folk cross with pagan influence. And why not? I don't see any conflict here. I don't see any conflict whatsoever. I think at the end of the day, these represent very much the same things. Now you can take and twist them any way you want, of course, but this is the most twisted of all. This is an indictment. This is the religion of modernity. I think we've seen it clear as day. And I'll bet another thing. John Forrest, don't know what that says. The generous benefactor of this church who died November 11th, 1893. I bet this was the first time that this was empty on Easter Sunday, these last 3 years. And as I exited the church, I looked up and saw on the tops, the peaks and roofs of all the houses around, these antennae. And isn't this doing the same thing? Pulling messages from the ether, from a source. And I'd put my life on the source of the messages coming through this antenna have much more to do with the cross on the sanitizer station and on the keep your flowers at home to prevent cross contamination sign at the feet of the Virgin Mary. It has more to do with that than the cross on top of the church, or really to the steeple of the church building itself. Because if you strip all this away and you go back to the steeple of the church building itself, that physical connectivity of connecting above and below, connecting a circuit between the atmosphere and the earth, being that conduit, the physical structure itself, I believe, beyond any dogma, even beyond any scripture, it's the thing that brings us, our physical form, into alignment with the divine source. That's my conviction. So I found myself at the Stone Tower. I had been here again 3 years prior. I came here with my boys last time. And when you know it, Stone Tower, this connection between heaven and earth. Now, what they tell us is that this is a hiding place for the monks that they built 1,000 years ago, give or take, to hide from marauders and bandits. This is 100 feet tall with a stone roof on top of a stone tower. And you're telling me that the monks out here on their pilgrimage had the means to quarry, carve, and erect granite stone 100 feet tall. And they did this all over Ireland. And don't we have two vying, like a power struggle? Because the abbey came a couple of centuries later, as I understand it. You know, there's an abbey and a cemetery adjacent to the stone tower, but the tower was here first, long ago. And when I look at this with its oddly placed apertures, they're not windows, they're openings, apertures. What this makes me think of is like a flute, and the wind really whips around here, and it's just kind of howling in there, and you hear crows and pigeons nested in there cooing, and it echoes, and it really reverberates. It's a really interesting structure to be close to. You feel the power, you feel the intensity and the energy, and it draws you to it. And again, it's interesting that the cemetery is surrounding it. I've always heard that these type of structures, like electroculture, right, that the plants grow more hardy around it. But here, this is where they put the cemetery, and I thought, well, it's, let it be. Let it be. And here we are from another perspective. This is so old. What is this? Why are these windows, these apertures like this? Like these two aren't even, none of them are in alignment. So, run this thing through a code machine, computer. I bet you it plays a tune. I bet you these apertures capture the wind in such a way as to reverberate. And I bet you if you went to another stone tower in a different location, those apertures, those openings would be in different places. But relative to the frequency of that spot, these are frequency resonators. They have to be, right? Well, first to look at the stone itself, because this was all of 3 meters, 3.5 meters across, maybe 10, 12 feet, this one stone. And it's hard to see them at first, because it's so old and worn, and just like kind of like looks like wrinkly skin, like almost like ruin-esque but intact, until you realize that all of these stones, first of all, they're enormous. But also, I've been used to seeing stones in megalithic structures in Peru and Egypt, right, that are carved out and like fit together like jigsaw puzzles. But look at this thing. Who chiseled these out like this? Each one. And keeping in mind, as tall as this is, the weight of above to have been standing for over a millennia, the forces on this are enormous. And that's why I think the biggest stones are here at the bottom. Like this, it looks like it's just locking everything in. And to pull this off on a curve, it's just, I think this is way beyond the capacity of the monks out here building their abbey. I just do. I caught a pigeon. Here's the abbey. All around this area, all around, there's these stone slabs marking graves, and they're heaving. And I thought how interesting that is, because the ground moves, the ground heaves. And I'm going to get into that principle further in a future video, but I'm going to put a bookmark here with these stones, and I'll bring this image back, because the more of these old buildings that I look at, it always seems like they have a strange relationship to the ground, where the stairs coming down were just an afterthought, where they just sort of spill down from this main level that's at head height more or less, and then you have these mud flooded windows and so forth in the ground. I'm starting to think that it's because of this effect. It's because if you stick around long enough, you know that the ground moves, and the ground is always moving. It's breathing, like the earth is alive, and it's always adjusting itself. And the ground is not, we pour concrete and asphalt and foundations and hope for the best, but that's not what the earth has in mind, that sense of permanence. And wouldn't you know it, there's pastures aplenty, because if you were a cow, isn't this where you'd want to be? And, well, back to my sister's house after this long excursion, retracing steps from my past trip with my boys, having my revelry in Ireland on Easter Sunday. And I'm reminded that we have to choose carefully what it is that we let in, who it is that we serve, And as if I needed one final reminder that when you're listening, using your intuition, you'll always be told what it is that you need to hear.